thinking more about any team that's out there right now in college football than we did the weekend before. Kind of a lull this last weekend in college football. You take Ohio State, for instance. They were supposed to be presented a challenge by Nebraska, but it didn't happen. And their schedule so far has been soft. And I think that it's only fair that if we're going to go after Alabama or anybody else, that we need to go after Ohio State. Because Florida Atlantic isn't exactly the team to beat right now outside of the, quote, Power 5 conferences. Maybe more like a Boise State or Central Florida or one of those football teams. But Cincinnati, so I will say this. I will give Ryan Day and his staff a lot of credit because right now this team is playing phenomenal football, all right? It would be easy to lay down given the circumstances that were left over from Urban Meyer. And when I look at Ryan Day, right now I do see a very similar situation starting to build for this football team. Remember, when Urban Meyer took over that team, they had a lot of leftover baggage from when Coach Tressel was there, right? In the very first season that Urban Meyer was there, he got that football team to go undefeated when they were literally playing for nothing. They were not able to compete in a bowl game. They were ineligible to be champions. So the real reality of it is the fact that Urban Meyer got those kids to do what they did. We're seeing a very similar thing with Ryan Day. It would be easy for the Ohio State Buckeyes to fold, to worry about all the stuff that was left over from Urban Meyer, but they didn't. And, the fact of the matter is that right now they're playing full four-quarter football. They're playing inspired football, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that is basically running through the competition. I think they've outscored their opponents 262-43 as of now, so they're taking care of business. I don't like their schedule. Obviously, we're going to see next weekend against Michigan State, who played a fairly good Arizona State football team. They just did beat Cal, but I think Cal was probably a little overrated. Again, I'm not a Big 12 or Pac-12 football fan. Regardless, the fact of the matter is that Michigan State defensively could present some problems to the Buckeyes, but offensively, I don't see where they're going to be any competition to them at this point. Like Herm Edwards said, you're not going to win a lot of football games 10-7 after his Arizona State football team did beat Michigan State. So we'll see how that plays out. I think it could be a good defensive game, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing how their offense can respond against a good defense. But obviously we're going to have to wait for that because the schedule just hasn't permitted them facing anybody that's really worth their salt, to be perfectly honest with you. In terms of the Pac-12, I still think that Utah is the best team in the Pac-12. Do I believe that they could compete with anybody in the playoff? I don't know. I really liked their physicality the first couple of weeks that I saw them play, especially their running back, Zach Moss. Unfortunately, though, that shoulder, we'll just kind of see as time goes along, but I don't know that there's anybody in the Pac-12 that can realistically compete with Clemson or Bama. Clemson's offense is not very good. That's maybe one thing that I think that we've all seen this season. But defensively, I think they're still a very solid football team. But offensively, Clemson's going to have to clean it up somehow. Look, I know Dabo Swinney is talking about the youth of this football team, and I completely understand where he's coming from. And then, of course, on top of that, you've played for the national title how many years in a row now? You're consistently in the playoff. And so now not only is everybody gunning for you, but now you have a very young football team. But that's not how people revere you, is it? They revere you as the team from being from last season. Now, I think you could talk to Nick Saban about that and say there are no excuses. I like the mentality in a lot of ways that he's taking. But by the same token, you go to any university to win. Now, does that mean that they're going to be phenomenal and finish the season out good this year? I don't know, but I'm telling you, watching Clemson versus watching Alabama versus watching OU, and we're seeing night and day with these football teams. We really are. Clemson pulled out that win against North Carolina, but I got to tell you, as close as that game was, and for the record, I think we all almost agree Mack Brown should have gone for two. Look, why bother taking it in an overtime and giving Clemson a chance to beat you there? Just beat them now. So I like the mentality. I think they did the right thing. And regardless, Clemson does come away with a win. I know a lot of people say a win is a win is a win. But one loss, I think, right now in the ACC could be a lot of trouble for you, especially with, Notre Dame having kind of the schedule that they have. There's other football teams right now in the Pac-12. You've got OU in the Big 12. They're going to be creeping up. You've got a couple of teams in the SEC. You've got Georgia, LSU, Auburn, Bama. So the real reality of it is if Clemson stumbles this season, we might actually see two teams out of the SEC be in a college football playoff. I wouldn't like it. You wouldn't like it, but that's just the way that it is. Speaking of mentality, how about Coach Mike Leach absolutely going in on his football team? He literally said that his team is fat, lazy, uninspired. He said we're soft. He said we're entitled. My goodness. It's difficult to know where he's coming from there, man. I mean, is he talking to himself? Is he mad at himself for not having his team prepared to play a game of football against Utah? Or is he legitimately upset with his kids over there at Washington State for just playing uninspired football? I didn't get a chance to watch that game. I normally am that guy that stays up and watches, those Pac-12 football games. I didn't get a chance to. I was just exhausted. My thing is simply this. Like I said, number one, I think Utah is the best team out of the Pac-12 right now with their physicality, with their defense. I don't think that there's a better team in the Pac-12, especially given the up and down nature of Stanford right now. You look at Cal making it into the top 25 after playing basically nobody. And then, of course, Arizona State comes along and beats them, and Arizona State has at least beat Michigan State, okay? My thing is this. We ask for people to be honest, then we get upset when they are. Some people laugh and find it funny, but at no point in time to me was Mike Leach being funny. And he's right. They do get a lot of good press because he's a teacher now. He's got a lot of clever quips. So a lot of that really has to do with him. And like I said, he may be essentially talking to himself. Do I like him saying those things out loud to the public, though? Look, I got a little bit of a chuckle out of it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. But in the same way that I said that Baker Mayfield should handle things internally, I do believe that Coach Leach could have done the same thing. I think he could have waited till he got to the locker room and said, guys, do you know what kind of football you're playing right now? Lazy, uninspired, just bad football. You guys gave them no resistance. You didn't even try. I feel like you don't care, and if you don't care, you don't need to be part of this program. That's real simple. It's cut and dry. And there's a lot of football coaches out there that'll tell you that. It's not a game. It's really not a game. And I understand where he's coming from with believing that you're entitled. And we're not talking about I need more money entitled. We're talking about, well, I just expect to be able to win a football game and we're just that good. Woo, woo, woo. Well, that's just not the case now, is it? Even if they were better on paper, that's not the way to play football. Do I think that WSU was better on paper than Utah going into that football game? No, I do not. But his coach has the mentality of we should be better and playing better than any football team that we come up against. We were a tough team last year. Most of those kids were back from last year. They're here this year. Why aren't they playing that same type of tough football? I'll tell you this right now. 95% of coaches can deal with a loss if they feel like you played as hard as you absolutely could. And that's real deal. Because those after-game speeches sound something like, you guys gave it all you had. I'm not upset with anybody. You left it all out on the field. And that's all I can ask from. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, even when you give your best. That's just a fact of life, right? There's not a coach on planet Earth that's not going to be upset if you do that. However, they will be ticked off if they feel like you didn't play good football and you didn't try and you didn't give a damn and there was no point to even being out there in the field in the first place. And I think that's where Mike Leach was coming from. In terms of the rest of the college football league, look, like I said, kind of a lull last weekend. I think obviously we found out that Maryland was not for real. I think we're seeing the Syracuse scenario from a couple of years ago where Syracuse beat Clemson and everybody's still talking about it for some odd reason. Remember, like I said, Syracuse didn't win a single game the rest of the way out. So I am Drew Duncan, host of the Full Court Press. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan 83. You can find me on YouTube. Simply look for Drew Duncan. The Full Court Press is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube as well. And do not forget, we are wherever you listen to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play the Full Court Press by Drew Duncan. And as always, don't you dare touch that dial.